What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TrueFan. And before we get into today's conversation with Jamie Lee, there's a couple things that we need to go over first. Number one, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please consider leaving a rating and a review. The more positive ratings and reviews you get, the more it helps some people find the show, and it really helps to grow the community that we're developing here. And if you're one of those people that have recently found the podcast, welcome. I'm very excited to have you here. Make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. And to everybody listening, make sure you share this to your Instagram story. Tag myself at the Jacob Kelly and tags Jamie at James Life with 2 E's on the end. And I'll feature you on my account and send you a message as well. And now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Jamie Lee. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by TrueFan. And today we are joined by Jamie Lee. Jamie is a travel creative and videographer. He's traveled to 30 countries across 6 continents and has plans to travel to every single country on the planet by his 40th birthday. Jamie's been documenting his travels through photography and videography, and as a result of the global pandemic, has had to pivot his content from highlighting incredible international destinations to ones right in his own backyard of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. His main platform to showcase these local adventures has been TikTok, where he posts to a highly engaged, hyper-targeted audience of nearly 30,000 people, and I'm excited to have him here to talk about everything TikTok and travel-related. Jamie, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob. I'm really excited to be here, and
I appreciate that, man. That makes me feel like there's a little bit of pressure here that I have to live up to this standard now. So we'll see if I could do that. But my first question, man, I want to just go all the way back to the beginning. What were you like as a kid growing up? Like, what were some of your interests? I know you played hockey competitively, but like, talk to me about your childhood for a minute.
Yeah, so growing up, hockey was definitely my main thing. So I started learning how to skate around 4 or 5, and then by 6, I started playing organized hockey. And then I played it probably at least 3 to 6 times a week within different organizations, just locally here in West Carleton as well as Canada, till I was about 16. So that was probably like the biggest part of my childhood was definitely that sport. Even in the summers, it was like I was definitely training to get better, doing lots of sprints and then running. I was still on the ice quite a bit. And that was kind of like my main thing for a while. But as I got older, I remember in the 6th grade, I really started getting into mountain biking. And mountain biking was that first sport and activity that I ever took up that I could see myself actually enjoying more than hockey. Which, like, you're 12 years old, kind of the sport that you had half of your life occupy most of your time, and then this new activity comes in and you think you enjoy it more, can be a little weird. So I kept riding my bikes, got into BMX, and then basically throughout my teens, mountain biking and BMX was kind of like the biggest thing. And then travel kind of fit in there towards my mid and late teens as well with the fam. And but seriously, it was all sports all the time. It was in the summers, like I'd play hockey, I'd mountain bike. Me and my boys, we'd go out and we'd play tennis matches in between. I did a lot of different activities and sports in middle school as well, like cross country, and got into ultimate frisbee in high school. It was just very athletic background, I've always been into following sports and playing sports, kind of how I grew up. But I guess going even further back, I guess where it all started in the childhood was moving to Ottawa in 2000 from St. John's, Newfoundland. So I am a Newfie, which is awesome. I get all my family's back there on the rock. But that's probably it in a couple seconds. Just very sporty background that led to me always wanting to be outside and cultivating an interest in nature.
And I want to dive a little bit further into mountain biking. And my big question with with picking up mountain biking versus hockey, like with hockey, there's an end goal in sight, right? Like even like in a game by game level, the end goal is to win the game. Long term, it's to make it to the next level, the next level, the next level. But as someone like, so again, this is from an outside perspective, so this might be a bit of an ignorant question, but what's the end goal with mountain biking? Like every day you go to the hill, like it might be to hit a certain trick, but like there's not technically like a winner and loser when you're out there every day. Like maybe there's competitions and I just don't know how that works, but like what is the end goal when you pick up mountain biking?
Yeah, so like if you get into mountain biking competitively, which was something I didn't do, but it was something I was considering for a period of time. Like there's different ways to do it because there's different like facets of the sport. So for most of what I was doing was downhill mountain biking. So it's essentially if you take the glade runs and the black and double black runs through the forest of a ski hill, remove all the snow, put yourself on a bike and you're going over rocks. You got to run through that trail as fast as possible. And competitively, what that looks like is it's a timed sport. So each person gets a chance to ride down the entire trail, top to bottom of the hill, and then you're timed on the clock. Whoever finishes fastest obviously wins. The fastest rider is the best rider. So it was definitely a period of time where I was really contemplating like racing and doing that competitively. But I think over a period of time, like kind of comparing the two sports together, what I realized was that hockey became almost like a chore because it got so competitive at a certain point. It was like you're on the ice 5 to 6 times a week. You're always seeing your teammates every single day. It can be very exhausting. And when there was a certain point where I was on the ice that frequently and I had another interest, and that interest was obviously to be on my bike. So there was like that conflict, and I realized like I didn't want biking to become another hockey for me. Like if another activity came up that I enjoyed just as much or more, I wouldn't want to be taking it competitively and that taking my enjoyment out of the sport and the activity. So it was always very leisurely. But on a long enough timeline, how people go pro is often they'll get sponsorships at the highest level. That'll be like energy drink companies like Red Bull. Obviously, big bike companies like Specialized or YT or any of those other brands can sponsor you. And then all the components. So a popular component company would be Shimano, who you'll see on even like smaller bikes, like little Walmart bikes. They make entry-level components, but then you get the higher end stuff as well. And components, that just means like your brakes, drivetrain, all that sort of stuff. So definitely sponsors and is probably the best way for pro mountain bikers to make money. But that wasn't something I was that interested in. I remember in high school, my dream was to get a sponsor. Just because it's almost like a badge of honor. Like in that sport, it's like if you can get a sponsor, it's almost like social proof of like how good you are at the sport. But it was never that serious for me. It was always just like my favorite activity to do with the boys. And we just try to get better every time. And it was definitely a fun point in my life when I was doing that kind of all the time.
Mm-hmm. And there's two key, I mean, I'm sure there's many influences that mountain biking had on your life, but there's two key things that I want to talk to you about today. And the first one is that mountain biking taught you how to embrace the uncertainty and the unknown through trying to break through the mental barrier of landing certain tricks or doing things like that. Like, is that something that you found where through having to kind of, when you're doing a trick, obviously, like the scariest part is not knowing how it's going to go. And you kind of have to embrace that uncertainty and just jump into the unknown. Is that something that you found through mountain biking?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing with mountain biking that I find is so essential and such a core part of the sport, especially with downhill and free ride, and I'll include BMX in that too, because it's a similar mindset and mentality, is that every time that you get on the bike, you are putting yourself in direct risk of serious injury and danger. And for a lot of people, that is the exact reason why they'll stay away from the sport, because like the consequences of failure are so high. So if you're going like 40 kilometers an hour down a hill through the forest and the trees, and if you slip and you fall, the things that you're falling into is a garden of rocks or stumps and trees and roots. You're gonna get messed up pretty good. And so over a period of time, what it teaches you is to constantly elevate yourself to the point where you are pushing yourself beyond your limits and beyond where your fear has taken you before. So every time you hit a new jump and you get bigger and bigger and bigger, there's that uncertainty of like, what is actually going to happen to me? And you have to have faith in your own ability and skills that you've acquired up to that point to go out and conquer that challenge. And for me, what that did over time was like, you're constantly putting yourself in a position where you are scared and you're terrified of a certain outcome, but you do it anyway. And then you get the psychological reward of that sort of accomplishment. And so I've really tried to take that mentality to just about everything that I do, because I think it's so important that you use kind of those barriers of fear and conquer them to become a better person. And I think that's like why I do vibe with Yes Theory a lot. It's seeking discomfort, which is exactly what mountain biking is, for the purpose of personal growth. And so that mentality is very cultivated from a young age in that sport. And then you get to carry that on with everything. So whether that's as simple as, like you're uncertain about a certain decision. For me, that at one point was, should I stay in university or not? And I'm sure we can get into that later. And then you just take that leap based on the evidence that you have and the skill set that you've acquired over time. That's certainly a lesson that I think it'll stick with me for the rest of my life. It's the risk or reward, and knowing how to balance that really well.
And the other thing I'm assuming that mountain biking had an influence on you is with the creative side, because from my understanding, kind of photography and videography and trying to get the videos of yourself doing jumps and making sick edits is like a part of the culture of mountain biking. So is that really where your creative side kind of got its roots, was within mountain biking?
Yeah, entirely. And pun intended, that is where the roots came, because you're always biking over roots. But yeah, so basically it's I remember like me and my boys, like we would make these little videos because we wanted to showcase our skills to the world. I think extreme sports as a whole, it's a part of the culture. If you're a skateboarder, you always want to get those clips of you riding and landing that tray flip. If you're into skiing, it's the same thing. Extreme sports really have this culture of filming and documenting that journey of progressing through those tricks and those steps, and then putting your best highlights and your best moments on your craft, and you really want to share those as much as possible. So I remember even just like getting more intricate videos, like myself and my friends, we once made this video called A Day in Narnia, but Narnia with a G, like you're shredding the gnar. And it was this full story of my buddies like playing Guitar Hero in his basement, and then he hears a mysterious knock. So he goes into the closet underneath his basement and he wakes up in this jump. And then we jump directly over him. And then we invite him out to shred with us in the land of Narnia. And like that was probably 2011, and that was like my first like chance ever just like messing around with video in a full, I don't want to say production, but like we created a little storyboard, and it was fully edited, and we shared it on a website called Pinkbike, which is essentially just like a social network for mountain bikers. And it was just the best time, and that was kind of my first introduction to video in the creative space, was just like making really cool GoPro videos for mountain biking and stuff, making Narnia videos, or coming up with ideas with my friends of like, how can we capture the things that we do best. And it's funny because like when I was mountain biking all the time, videography was never something that I thought of that much. It was just a very secondary element that ended up kind of taking over my life down the road. So, but that was definitely the introduction.
Mm-hmm. And so at that time, like, so when you ultimately decided to pick up videography, was it because you enjoyed it doing mountain biking? Like it might not have been something that you thought of at the time, but like 2-3 years down the line when you were like, oh, I actually really enjoyed the video component. Was it because of the mountain biking, or was it other circumstances that caused you to become a videographer?
Well, there were certainly many different circumstances. So I think what was really interesting with that was all of my experiences with video had been immensely positive. Like to this day, I still think that Narnia video is like one of my favorite pieces that I've ever been involved with. And every time that I went out filming, even if it was with mountain biking, like it was just like the best time. Like my best memories as a kid were associated with being on my bike and then filming it. And we never took that stuff seriously. And so then to get a little more deep, basically in 2016, my best riding buddy, like my buddy CJ, who I'd ridden bikes with like for years and years and years and was like my best friend, he passed away. And so we were basically coming up with different ways of how can we support different mental health causes within our city, and how can we support this in a way that we can tell his story. And so we were approached by the Queens Bay Carleton Hospital Foundation to make a video celebrating him. And so me and my other riding buddy, Ben, CJ, and I were like this trifecta of mountain bikers. It was like the three of us that rode bikes every single day, and we were the ones always filming together. And so we realized, like, okay, like, if we want to share who he was, like, we have to be able to put his story into a video that can be presented at this event to try and raise money. But I don't think there's anybody that is capable of making this video other than us, because we know who he was the best. Obviously other than his family. And so at the time, like, our silly little videos, like, we never put much effort into them, and I wasn't even the one editing them most of the time. I was just one of the guys filming and one of the riders in them. And so we took all the clips that we could find of different bike clips, ski clips, Snapchat clips, and we edited this film to all of his music. And as Ben and I, we were editing this thing, it was so captivating, because we were telling the story of somebody who we loved so dearly, and we knew that we were going to make such a big impact with this, and everything felt so right. And this was like September of 2016. Like, there was not a second that I was editing this where I was distracted looking at anything else. It was so focused, because like it was an instant affair. And eventually we finished this video and it gets premiered. And it was amazing to see that, like, when we were editing this, like, there were points I was like, okay, like, let's make people laugh right here, because we want to show that he was a really funny person. I was like, let's make people like cry here, because like certain parts you do need to evoke some emotions. And then when this video gets premiered in front of all these people at this big event, those things happened. Like, people started laughing when I like put in funny things. People started crying at certain parts, and it was like just a roller coaster of emotions where we were planning to have certain emotions. And I realized, like, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. It was like, most people don't have it, but for me, it was very much like a switch. I was like, this is incredibly impactful. I enjoyed making this, and I get to, keep up the memory of my closest friend growing up through video production. And so that was kind of like where things really, really took another level for me, was that sort of whole story. And to this day, it's like, it's one of the things I'm most proud of is that little film.
And when you premiered it, was that the same day where you got to help donate $100,000 to the Queensway Carleton Hospital and tell your story of mental health?
No, so that was a couple months prior to that, actually. So that one, I wasn't involved in the donation. I was involved with the presentation of it, which was still just as incredible. So about 6 weeks after he passed away, I was approached by the hospital as well as the SENS Foundation to kind of tell my story, explaining about how mental health affects people, as well as like that hospital in particular, as that was the hospital that he stayed in. And so I was able to kind of tell that and just be a part of that massive donation. And there was a bunch of different SENS players there, as well as media outlets. I wasn't even aware that I was being broadcasted on CFRA at the time. And it was certainly one of the highlights of my life was being able to present that, because for me, like, $100,000 in one check is such a ridiculous amount of money. And to have even just like a small part of just like presenting that to the media and the hospital was really, really special.
I thought it was kind of bold that you straight up told a bunch of SENS players in the room that you were a Canadiens fan.
Yeah, you did do your research. Yeah, my opening line was I came up, and you can't quite see it in that video because it starts like 5 seconds after it. But literally the first thing I said was, it's funny how the SENS Foundation chose a Habs fan to represent themselves today. And there definitely a unique reaction seeing Chris Phillips and Chris Neal and a couple other guys in the room chuckling at that.
And how does that, like, again, anything, like if this is a question you don't want to answer, feel free to not answer this. But how does going through all of that change you as a human being?
Totally. So basically, like, I was 19 years old when he passed away, and for me, what that basically meant was like you got to grow up fast. Like the realities of life and even death, like just come in so quickly, and it's not something that I feel like any 19-year-old should have to face. You know, like losing like their best mate and like somebody that you always thought was going to be like by your side at your wedding. But ultimately, like what it did is I think it accelerated certain aspects of my life, because I looked at this and I made a few commitments to myself, and I realized I was like, okay, like I understand like the devastation that mental illness can cause to somebody. And so I was like, you know what, like I want to make sure that everything I do is going to make sure that I never end up in that position. And so that means that I'm going to commit to completely being empathetic as possible, understanding that I know very little about even the people closest to me, and being really empathetic that there's so much that I don't know and don't understand about what their experience is. And just understanding that, you know, like if I give that hand of help, that's the best that I can do. It was also the commitment to, you know, try and be as foolishly as ambitious and silly with those goals as I could possibly become, because I knew that I only, like, when you lose somebody early in your life, you understand like how rare of a chance it is that we have just to live. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make the absolute most of that opportunity and try and squeeze as much of that out. So if I can come up with these silly and crazy and almost foolishly nuts ideas, I'm at least going to try to pursue them and see how it goes, and meet people along the way that kind of feel the same. And so that really, really changed me quick on that front. And then that's when I started taking travel more seriously, because I realized, like, you know, you never know what can happen. So you know, a pandemic could hit and then every single airline in the world is not taking you to where you want to go. And just little things like this. So I was like, I just want to squeeze every ounce of opportunity that I can possibly find, and just try my best to make those little things happen. And if I don't, I can live with that, but at least I can have fulfillment in the process of saying like, hey, like there was something I decided to go after, and I at least made an effort for it. So I'd say it's definitely those two things. It was like, it really made me more ambitious and driven to do like everything that I wanted to do. And it made me extremely empathetic for different people's circumstances.
And what were some of those ambitious goals you set for yourself?
So definitely the one that you mentioned at the beginning was to visit every single country on the planet, all 196 before the age of 40. And also try to be the first person to have individual films for each. So that could be like, and when I describe a film, I'm not talking like a feature-length film. I'm talking like it could be a mini doc. It could just be a vlog, or just something that shares my experience with people. And the whole point of that is to try and break down barriers between cultures, societies, languages, skin colors, and just show people how beautiful the world is and how similar people are across it. So that's certainly one of them. I would say that's probably the craziest one at the moment. One of them is obviously to be fully financially free from my own laptop. Obviously, I'm very far from that, but essentially the goal would to be having a YouTube channel that can sustain myself, and TikTok is certainly a part of that strategy. And just being able to be my own boss, you know, like have my own core business that can take me across the world and try to achieve these goals, while also hopefully raising money for different causes, whether that's conservation or mental health or different things like that. So that's probably the core of those foolishly ambitious goals.
And was making the decision to pursue these goals, was that around the same time that you ultimately decided to drop out of school?
Yeah, so for me, dropping out was awesome. It's actually kind of funny. So basically, in 2018, when I was traveling through Southeast Asia for nearly 3 months, That was when I was really making my first commitment to making vlogs as often as possible, sharing as much of my photos and stories as I could as I've traveled. And that was like my first big international trip that I did alone. And it was also my first trip that I did for an extended period of time that was solely for the purpose of content, as well as like life experiences. And I remember being out there, and my time to register for my courses was in July, and I had already been exploring Thailand for like 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, like I can wait till August, to select my courses and stuff. And then August came around, and I was like, honestly, like there's no way I'm going back after this. For myself personally, I recognize that videography, travel, destination marketing, and social media was exactly where I wanted to focus all of my attention to. And for myself, I just felt like the opportunity cost of going back into the classroom would just take out a lot from me trying to learn more about those things specifically, as I didn't feel like the infrastructure was there for the specific skills that I was trying to acquire. Ultimately, I feel like I did make the right decision. Things have worked out quite well. It's definitely something that wasn't like super quick to come to, but certainly happy with where it went. And it's funny how it like I basically decided just not to register for my courses when I was traveling.
And I have a quote written down here of yours. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit further. And that quote is, "Getting a degree raises your floor, but not your ceiling."
Yeah. So honestly, I think for historically, a degree for me has always been something where it's like it allows you to basically check the box for most employers, where most employers the initial requirement is to have a degree, and that's to like have a degree in this space, whether that's communications or business or whatever. But I find in the world of social media and entrepreneurship and that stuff specifically, obviously it's a lot different in engineering and stuff. For me, I just really found that it's not necessary, because I find the greatest utility that we have right now is our actionable skill sets and the value that we can provide directly. And so I recognize if I could get really good at telling stories, if I can get really good at video production and photography, drone work, as well as understanding the inner workings of social channels, then I'll ultimately be able to provide value despite not having that degree. So oftentimes I wouldn't be necessarily able to apply for certain positions because I don't have that entry level requirement. But I find in many cases it gets your foot in the door, but it doesn't guarantee that you, one, get the job, or two, are able to ascend in that corporate structure or on your own. So that's mostly what I mean by that.
Okay. And so I do want to dive a little bit further into travel now. So you said that first big trip was your solo trip through Southeast Asia. Before that, I know you did trips to Europe, I believe 4 times between 13 to 17 with your family. You went on a big trip to South America with friends the year a little bit before the Southeast Asia trip, right?
Yeah. So that was 2017. Went to Chile with some friends from university.
Mm-hmm. And so this big solo trip then, like what made you decide to do a solo trip? And especially for that duration, like where did the genesis of that idea come from?
Yeah, so I recognize that when I was in Chile, I spent a lot of time with my friends and I was filming a lot of it. And and I'm really lucky that my supporting cast in my group are like just the absolute best people. But I recognize that if I was filming to the extent that I was, and we were there for a month or longer, it would probably be pretty exhausting for the people around me. Because realistically, like, yes, I am there to hang out, and I am there to get those experiences, but I'm also there on a mission to try and build something for myself through video, and so I recognize that there's realistically probably nobody that can come with me for 2.5 to 3 months, just because I'm living at home, so they're probably paying rent and they can't just like pay rent and then afford to travel as well. Or they just couldn't make that sort of commitment for that long of a time. or just weren't interested. And so I realized like the only way that this trip can happen is by myself. So that was one, as well as I really recognized that if I want to get the most out of this from a videographer's perspective, then I'm just gonna have to go on my own. And maybe I network when I'm out there, but the plan was just head out there, film as much as possible, go on your own schedule, stay longer to get those shots if you need, and just do it and live it up. And to this day, I think it's the single greatest decision I've made in my life was to solo travel there.
And what if you're not a content creator? Like I've heard of people saying solo travel is just good for the soul. Like, is that still something you'd recommend even if you're not a content creator?
Yeah, so I think like honestly, I think solo travel is one of the greatest things that you can do. And the reason that I say that is because the first thing that you realize is that when you are so far away, like geographically speaking, from every single person that you've ever known and you've ever met, what you start to realize is that you are very much alone with your thoughts, and quite obviously. But what ends up happening is that you start doing a lot of introspective reflection on who you are, why you are, and how you got to where you are. And so what ended up happening with me is I'm spending all this time alone, totally on the other side of the world, and I started realizing that, hey, like these people in the Philippines that I'm spending time with, like these little community members, would have absolutely no care in the world about like some of the little petty dramas that were going back a couple months ago. And so that then you get this perspective of like, like those problems that I was facing with certain people, those problems that maybe some other people were facing, like in the grand scheme of things don't actually matter. And I think that perspective is totally invaluable. On top of that, like you start to really realize like why do I like certain things that I do? Because you keep asking yourself certain questions about yourself, and ultimately it's the journey of discovering yourself and becoming your own best friend and becoming comfortable with being alone but not lonely. And that in itself is a skill that I think is so valuable that a lot of people are afraid to go places on their own. They are afraid to be on their own solely for the sake of loneliness. And I don't think that that's something that you should be fearful of. I think having an open mind to those sort of activities can really provide some new experiences that are totally unique. And I think it's the most unique and most challenging experiences that ultimately bring the most value to us in life.
And despite knowing that now and knowing why you were traveling solo, you had a mission, you had a purpose to what you were doing. Was there still nerves? Like when you're sitting at the gate at the airport, waiting to board a flight, knowing you're going to be leaving Canada and going to the other side of the world alone for 3 months. Is there nerves when you're sitting there?
It's so funny because even before I left, everyone was asking me that question. They're like, oh, are you not scared to head out there? Like you're going alone, like you don't know anybody even in that continent, let alone that city or that country. And to be honest, like, no, it was one of those things that from the initial implementation of the idea just felt so at its core correct and right. And everything just seemed to fit in place. So I remember it was definitely emotional when my mom dropped me off to the airport. And knowing that this is the first time I'm spending like 3 months away from her, my dad, and my family. So that was a little bit emotional, but fear wasn't the emotion. It was just knowing that like I'm about to embark on some sort of life-changing adventure, and I don't know how it's going to change my life, but I know that it will impact me positively. And it was a bit of sadness from that, but everything else was just elation, just pure stoke. And it's hard to describe because I'm feeling those emotions coming back as I reminisce, but I was just pumped.
One thing I'm personally curious about this is, as a picky eater, how did you find eating when you traveled there? Was that something you were worried about? Because myself, I'm also a picky eater, and that is one thing I would be worried about if I were to travel across the country by myself.
I'm not even gonna lie, like I'm the pickiest eater on the planet, and that was probably the one thing I was actually a little bit nervous of. I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm going to Thailand, I'm going to try a lot of Thai food, but I hate everything. I hate nuts, I hate vegetables, like I eat like a toddler still. And so I was like, oh goodness, like how on earth is this going to work? And to my own surprise, I was shocked. My palate certainly grew, at least a little bit. But I was having like different Thai meals, some Penang curry every single day. I remember being in Kuala Lumpur, trying some butter chicken at an Indian restaurant that was right outside of my hostel, fell in love with that. And I started experimenting with other Indian foods and Thai foods. Then we went to Bali, some Balinese cuisine. And it was awesome. Like, I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed the food culture around the world that I don't want to say it turned me into a foodie, because I don't travel for food, but it's certainly an aspect that I do try to include in my travels now. And even locally, I'm trying to experiment with more food stuff, because that trip it really, really opened my eyes to international cuisine and culture, and shocked me at how much a picky eater like myself can enjoy some unique flavors.
And of all the places you went on that trip, the Philippines was your favorite.
Correct.
So tell me about the Philippines. Like, I know you're one of the first tourists ever to visit a specific island when you were there. Like, what made your time in the Philippines so special?
Like, I just think the island of Siargao in the Philippines will forever remain like this little place in my heart. I had never been to a place that was just incredibly gorgeous, like from a landscape perspective, just the ridiculous amount of coconut palm trees everywhere, and the ridiculously blue water, and all these like great islands that you never knew existed. And so that was like the first thing you notice about it, and that's probably what every influencer will talk about for the Philippines and Siargao, is like how beautiful it is in the blue ass water. But for me, it was like somehow the most beautiful tropical place I had ever seen. That sort of landscape became secondary, and it became secondary because I was living just outside of this little town called Dapa for a week. And in Siargao, the main tourist area is a place called General Luna, and Dapa is pretty much just locals. So staying in this Airbnb run by a local family, and every single day I'm heading into this little local market, eating with locals and interacting with the community. And it was awesome. Like, I found two kids, they were the only two BMX riders on the entire island of Siargao, trying to set up a little skate park for themselves with little boxes on, not even concrete, just like little dirt. It was like a port next to like a docking station for different ships to come in and out of. And so I started every night. I'd go and I'd ride bikes and teach these kids like BMX tricks, because they were just learning and they don't have access to a skate park. So that initially was like, these guys are having so much fun riding their bikes right now, the same way I was enjoying myself throughout most of my teens. But they don't have the same access to skate parks that I did, but they're enjoying it just as much. And that was the first little connection that I had, was those kids. And then I started playing soccer with some other kids in that sort of neighborhood. And then I ended up going on little adventures to different islands, and every single place that I go, I'd make an effort to connect with the local community. And eventually there was this little island called Corregidor, and I was invited to have a lunch with the mayor of that island in that town of 600 people, and he invited me into his home with his family. We had some boiled squid, and I just realized like the invaluable like human connection that the Filipino people had. They just love opening their doors for strangers. They just love community, and that was something that I really gravitated towards. And then I remember my last day there, we had done a bunch of different island tours, and I remember seeing these islands, and they looked gorgeous. They had these big grassy fields on the top. It looked like some cool beaches. And I asked my guide, and I was like, hey, like, can we go check these out? And he's like, oh, they're not really tourist places or anything. Like, we don't take tourists there. Like, they're just little villages. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I want to go. Because I realized, like, one, they're incredibly beautiful, and two, like, this is an opportunity to go connect with more incredible people, because every person I met there was so friendly, so open, so kind, and so warm. And so I go, and we go to these little villages that have maybe 20 to 30 people living in them, and everybody speaks English, and it was amazing. Their second language is English, but they learn it at a young age, and that trend continued. They kept inviting me into their homes. They kept inviting me to go do different experiences with them, and they wanted to learn about who I was just as much as I wanted to learn about who they were. And that whole experience on the people side of things is always why I will say the Philippines is my favorite place. Just throughout all of my travels, I've never experienced anything like it, where people are so open and genuine and just beautiful. You know, like I actually feel guilty that I had such a great experience and that most people haven't had that yet. You know, it still to this day boggles my mind how much I enjoyed that place.
And there's an epic photo, I believe it's from Siargao, where you're doing a backflip off a diving board. And as epic as that story is, or that photo is, there's a little bit more to the story, right? Like that was pretty shallow water you were jumping into.
Yeah, so right, it's like a 12-foot tall diving board. In 2018, I was like all about backflips. Like I was doing backflips off walls, I was doing backflips off the ground, like off of diving boards, off of trees and stuff. Like I just loved them. And I did a flip off this, and my feet went straight through. You know, I landed it perfectly. It was great. It was awesome. Just the way you want to land. And as I landed, I went straight to the bottom, and my foot just smacked this rock. And it was not a sharp rock. It was very, very blunt, but I hit it so hard that it basically just like totally messed my foot up. Instant bruising, instant swelling, and it even like cut my foot quite a bit. So basically the rest of my Siargao trip after that, I was kind of hobbling around and stumbling. I was worried it might have been broken. I never got it checked out. It wasn't broken. But yeah, that was not a fun time.
I can imagine. And one other thing too, I'm sure that it wasn't the most enjoyable thing, was you looked super sunburned at that point in the trip. Was that the case?
Yeah, like I'm notoriously bad for not packing enough sunscreen. It's like I'm always out in the sun. I'm a pasty white guy, and then I just remember I would put on sunscreen and I'd still burn. And so then it gets to the point where you're like, what's the point? So I think one day I just forgot to put it on, and I paid the consequences for it. But it is what it is, you know? I still am, despite almost breaking my foot, and despite those nasty sunburns and the ridiculous blisters I had on my feet, that like just tore like a couple layers of skin off my heels and stuff, I still say there's nothing I disliked about that trip.
Do you dislike it all, almost getting mugged in Thailand?
Yeah, okay, that was interesting when, oh my goodness. So I remember, and I was telling Deepak this story the other day. I was, you know, going to a bathroom in the middle of a tropical storm, and there's a little split, like a Y in the road. And the left would be to the rest of the village and the rest of the tourist area, and the right is like this dirt road, and then like 20 meters down that dirt road is this tiny little brick box building that happens to be the bathroom. So as I step in, immediately I see at the very end of this little hallway these two Thai men just chilling there. And my first thought goes like, oh my gosh, like this building is so tucked away from everything else. There's a tropical storm. I was like, if they wanted to mug me, literally not a single person would hear me. And so I was like, okay, like I got to get my business done quick and I'm out of here. So I did that. And I was like, hey, I'm taking one big leap out this door, and I like bolted out the door, and they were like within 2 feet of me now. Instead of being at the back of the hallway 20 feet away, it was almost like they were waiting right outside my stall. And so then I walk out really quickly back onto the road, and they start following me. And then I start walking faster, and I see one of them, he starts like running towards me. So I just sprinted down, ran back to my buddies that I met at the hostel, some American guys, and realized like crap, like those guys were, there's a good to fair chance they were trying to get my wallet or more.
A question I used to ask people on the podcast all the time is crazy travel stories. I know that definitely classifies as one. I know you've had trouble. You got stopped at the Moroccan border because you had a drone, and those are illegal in Morocco. But like, what are some other crazy travel stories that you've had?
Oh geez, crazy travel stories. So I remember there was one night in Bali. It was like my second night. and this one's a bit of a longer story, but it's funny, so I'll tell it. And so basically what happens, it's my second night in Bali, and again, traveling alone, and I go to this beach in Canggu. Canggu is like one of the main areas there, especially for digital nomads. And so I'm hanging out at this beach, and I see they have an open mic night. And so basically what it is, there's a band playing, and somehow that band can play nearly every single song known to man. Like, you just tell them a song, they're like, we know it. And then people just go up and they'll open mic night and sing it. And so for me, my only social anxiety that I have, like, I don't mind being in front of thousands of people and talking or doing like silly little things or making a fool of myself in front of a bunch of people. The only thing that actually scares me is like singing in front of people. I'm not good at it. I'm just awful. It's not something you want to hear. And so I was like, I have this perfect opportunity to go out and tackle that fear. Kind of the same thing that I was talking about earlier with mountain biking, understanding where there's those fear barriers and breaking through them for personal growth. I was like, this is a great opportunity for that. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like this is terrifying. And so I'm sitting there for like 20 minutes thinking, what song should I do? What song should I do? And eventually I was like, screw it. I'm going to go up there and do She Will Be Loved by Maroon 5. So I go up, and somehow they knew that song. They knew it. And I just take the mic and I start sweetening the crowd a bit. And I go like, all right, now listen, everybody. You might be coming up here expecting some American Idol performance, but I can trust you that that is not the case tonight. In fact, I'm traveling alone, and this is my biggest fear, singing in front of people. And I'm deciding that I'm going to face this right now. Don't expect much, but here is She Will Be Loved. And there was like 150 people watching. There was like the bar that was up on top of the beach. Everyone was like kind of looking out, watching. They had a bunch of like different tables and chairs set up everywhere. So like I had a crowd, you know? And so I started singing this song, voice cracking, it's going great, you know, like it's people think I'm hitting high notes, but it's just my voice breaking and shooting up to the stars. And that went great, but that's and then I finished it feeling awesome, got a big round of applause for just doing it, but that's not where the story ends. So the guy comes up to me and he's like, man, I was so inspired by what you just did that I'm gonna go do it myself, because I too think that singing in front of people is my biggest fear. And I was like, awesome. So he goes and he sings, and he like, I think he was on this like bender for like weeks, and he has this like chain smoker sort of raspiness to his voice. So it was like, it was kind of what he sounded like. But I was like, you go, Ben, like, let's go. So then him and I decided to go out for some drinks after, and we go to this little like corner store and whatnot, and we're at this corner store sharing some drinks. We start talking to some British girls and stuff, and we end up afterwards going to like a little club with them, just hanging out, meeting people, whatnot. And then at the end we go back to that little corner store just to hang out, chat, and whatever, the four of us. And so while we're there, this Balinese guy comes up, and he starts talking to one of the girls, asking just a bunch of random questions that made like no sense, and she's kind of just like nodding her head like yeah, like okay, sure. But then the Balinese guy like flips a switch. And so this is why I had to like tell all the context before, because it is a long story, but he flipped a switch and he goes, why are you so disrespectful to me? And she's like, what? She's like, I'm chill. Like, are you chill? He's like, no, like, you're disrespecting me. Like, I'm giving you advice and you're just ignoring me. Like, you're disrespecting me. And she's just like, no, like, I'm being chill. What I didn't realize about the guy Ben that I was with, the other guy that sang, was that he had like spent some time in prison. So like he's a tough dude. So he comes up to the Balinese dude and he goes, is there a problem here? And he, by the way, he's like loaded in tats and stuff, and he's pretty young too. Like he's about my age, like 24 or so. And so the Balinese dude is like, no, man, it's all chill. Like, I'm just giving some advice. Like, it's all good. Like, no problems here. And then this is where things get really bad, because then Ben goes like, he looks at the Balinese dude and like touches his hair, and he goes, "You know, your hair makes you look a little gay." And this is like, I'm in my head and I'm like, oh my God, this is getting bad. And the Balinese guy just flips, like just gets so mad, like tries to like hop across the table and like literally just tries to like start punching him and stuff. People start grabbing the Balinese guy. And then Ben is like laughing at this dude. And he's like, the Balinese dude is like, "You don't know who I am. I will F you up." I was like, "Oh, you're just like a little blah blah blah." And I was like, yo, this is getting nuts. Then all of a sudden this like big 6'5" guy, Anthony, comes up to us and he's like, "Listen, like, I'm gonna get you out of here. Like, this guy's getting a little crazy. He's literally trying to throw chairs at us, mostly at Ben." And Anthony's like, he's got like the body of like a Kobe Bryant. Like, he's just shredded, you know, and he's a basketball player from Miami. So like, we're like, okay, like, Anthony's our guy. We're safe. So we like hop on our scooters and we head down and we're like, okay, like, we'll drop the girls back to like their hostel or whatever, and we'll part ways, and great night. So eventually we realized we like missed the turn for their hostel, and we're stuck in the middle of this road, like nobody knows where, and we're like, crap, like, we gotta head back. So as we pull over to the side, we're talking, chatting, and regrouping. We see a set of headlights in the distance at like 4 or 5 in the morning in Bali, and it's like coming down super quick, and it's the Balinese dude. And so the Balinese dude pulls up, hops off his motorbike. Ben gets the girl off his bike. Me, Anthony, and the other girl are kind of just chilling on ours. And the dude starts running in a full sprint towards Ben. Ben is cackling, laughing. And he jumps and soars through the air and tries to like, he like kicks him in the back. Like, just straight up like assaults him. And then Ben like starts doing donuts around him. And then this Balinese lady, old lady, grabs the dude, the Balinese guy, like starts screaming at us, "Run, run, run!" And then we left and somehow escaped safely. So that's a very long story, but I try to condense it as much as I could. But that is like probably my craziest story that I have.
That's wild. That's wild.
Yeah. I need to take all the time in the world for that one because it's just nuts.
But back to the beginning of that story, you're talking about how that you were singing in front of people. And on the note of music, I'm curious if you could talk to me about the playlists you have for each of your trips.
Awesome question. So every single trip that I go on, I try to exclusively listen to one album. When I go on longer trips, like months at a time, I might make a playlist that I'll add to, but I just want to listen to those songs. Because what I realized was, like, when I was a kid, in 2011 and 2012, I had a little iPod that had like next to no memory on it. It was like an 8 gig iPod Touch, and most of my memory was occupied by the apps and the games that I had, so I couldn't actually have that many songs. So I only had maybe like 15, 20 songs. And of those, like, I would probably only listen to like 4 or 5, because, you know, when you get those couple songs that you just want to listen to, you just vibe through them over and over and over again. And so what I realized was, like, oh my goodness, like, I would come back from my trips, and every time I heard those songs, whether that's on the radio or comes up on shuffle or whatever, it would take me back to like specific memories and moments that I had on those and give me just this nostalgia overload. So I realized, I was like, you know what? Every trip I go on from now on, I'm just going to get an album that I really want to listen to, but I haven't had the chance to. I'm going to listen to it. So 2016, when I went to Whistler, that was Coloring Book by Chance. Then in Peru, it was Billie Eilish's last album. Just a bunch of different things. And then Southeast Asia, for me, that was Geography by Tom Misch. In Europe, that was Land and Sea by Ziggy Alberts. It's just always like, I just found like it's so cool to listen to these songs like a maniac and crazy. And then every time I hear those songs again, I get flooded with very specific details of those trips that I think I otherwise would have forgotten about. And it really makes me just proud of like the things that I've done.
And so now when you listen to them, it like basically transports you back to that time in your life, right?
Entirely. It's the most like beautiful thing.
That's awesome. And I want to touch a little bit more on how you were talking. You mentioned how the pretty much one of the main purposes of this trip to Southeast Asia was for you to kind of build up a travel portfolio so you could start pitching companies and getting sponsorships and working while you're traveling. So how did that go? Like from high level over the course of this trip, like did that work? Did you get to work with any companies on that trip? How's it gone since? Like how'd that go?
Yeah, so basically on that trip, I made a ton of vlogs and travel guides, and I made one film in particular, and that was a short film that I really tried to encapsulate how much the island of Siargao meant to me. And so I think I titled it Siargao, the Island That Changed My Life. And so I was like, awesome, like I've got a bunch of different examples of bodies of work of my best photos, a short film, vlogs, as well as like travel guides. And most of those are all on YouTube as well. And so I was like, awesome, like I'm really, really proud of these things. And so in 2019, the year after, I realized like, oh, like this Philippines video, this film that I put out received like over 50,000 views on Facebook, has several thousand views on YouTube, and they're all like just immensely positive. So I was like, cool, this is certainly something that I could use as a piece that I can prove the value of my work to potential companies. So when I realized that I wanted to go to Peru to head to Machu Picchu, started researching some different treks to go on, and I really thought the Salkantay trek, the 5-day trek, was going to be my best option. So I booked a flight to Peru, and I was like, you know what? I bet you with all the work that I put out last summer, there's going to be at least one company that thinks, okay, like we would love you to come in and just create content for us, and they'd be willing to allow me to travel for free throughout the country. And so went to YouTube, looked up Salkantay trek, found a video, and I was like, okay, cool, this little influencer, she's got 100,000 followers, but the quality of her content was very different than mine. It was very like simplistic stuff, and I was like, okay, like if I can make more commercial like work for them, maybe there's a chance that they'd be interested. So I reached out to the same company called Conde Travel at the time that she was involved with, and just sent them an email with some of my work, and I'd already booked my flights to Peru, and I was like, listen, like if you're interested, I'd love to exchange some content assets and videos and photos for a trip through the Salkantay trek. They came back like 20 minutes later and was like, we'd absolutely love to have you on. In fact, we'll bring you on the Salkantay trek, the Inca Jungle trek, a tour of Cusco, as well as the Sacred Valley to occupy your 12 days here. And I was like, oh my goodness, like how did that just work so well? In 20 minutes, I sent out a pitch and I got back literally 4 times what I asked for. So Peru, went down there and did all that sort of stuff, and I took the same mentality in Peru as I had in Southeast Asia. All the assets and the content that I create here can be leveraged to hopefully acquire more travel clients in the future. So I used a lot of that work and Southeast Asia work to start pitching brands around Europe. And so I started originally pitching around the Canary Islands in Spain. I really wanted to go there. Then I started pitching around Greece, Turkey, and Croatia, and sent out 32 different pitches, because clearly in Europe they're not as keen as they are in South America. So that was definitely a lesson I learned. But eventually, Go Croatia Sail responded saying they loved my work in Peru and in Southeast Asia, and they'd love to have me on just to take some photos of the boats and the guests, and then maybe make like a couple testimonial vids. So the work was super, super easy. And what was great was like they also explicitly said, like, we don't care if you edit these when you get back home. We really like want you to enjoy this experience as much as a guest would. So I got to basically live like a guest for free with my camera, take some videos, take some photos throughout all the Croatian islands, and experience that all for free basically. So all my travel in Peru and Croatia was covered. That includes meals, accommodations, and excursions. So it was awesome. So in 2020, it's a little more difficult to do that, seeing as international travel is kind of unavailable. But that was certainly how I leveraged 2018 summer to 2019 summer.
And one thing I want to kind of make or contextualize for the audience is when you started doing travel video, would you say 2017 is probably an accurate start point for when you started doing this kind of work?
Yeah, beginning of 2017 is when I got the Adobe Creative Suite. After my Europe trip in 2016 with my family, I played around a bit with iMovie at the end of 2016, but that was pretty much it. So 2017 is definitely the year that I would say it all began.
Which I think is interesting because I would say probably 2015 to 2017 was probably like peak travel content creator time. Like that's when you have like the High on Life guys going full force. You got Fun for Louie, you got Ben Brown, you have all these creators. But despite all of that, you weren't worried, right? Like, were you ever worried about oversaturation or anything like that when you started to create travel content?
Yeah, it's something people ask me that a lot. Like, do you ever worry about entering a market that many deem as saturated? And to me, I really don't, because for one, I just believe that talent will always rise to the top. And I think the beautiful part of social media is the abundance. And by that, I mean, it's like there could be 20,000 travel content creators, and I think every one of them would still have the chance to make a very solid brand for themselves. I think there really is access to that many people and that much potential. So for me, it's like, yeah, because you can name maybe 6 or 7 or 8, 12 people that do it really, really well. I'm like, that's not that many. Like, there's still room for hundreds more, I think, to be doing this effectively and well. And on top of that, I also recognize that one of the greatest parts of branding is being able to add your own unique elements to that. And for everybody, that's going to be their personalities. And no two people have the same personalities. So there's always going to be room to share your perspective. That's just how I look at it. I just think there's so much abundance out there. And if maybe saturation just means it takes a little bit longer now. But doesn't mean it's not possible.
And then, so I'm sure people listening to this in a post-COVID world are going to want to start doing their own traveling and creating content around it. Obviously, you can't do that right now because of COVID, but talk about a little bit, because a lot of it's been just the excitement of traveling and everything and all the perks that come with it and from creating the content. But talk to me about kind of the other side of travel filmmaking. I don't want to use the word the negative side, but maybe just the other side. Some of the things people don't see, whether it be like trying to find good Wi-Fi to get a video uploaded or traveling with all of your gear. Like, talk to me about that side of being a travel filmmaker.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of things about travel that people don't necessarily get to see. So for one, the first thing that comes to my mind is safety. When you're solo traveling, for me, it's like I'm a 6'1" guy who probably wouldn't be the easiest target to, mug or rob as I'm being traveled or as I'm traveling. But what I will say is that I recognize that like I could have up to $10,000 worth of laptops, camera gear, drones, and all that sort of stuff in my bag at any given moment. And even though the person who sees me might just look at this as a normal bag, there's always the potential that if somebody can recognize that this is a camera bag, then I am a prime target. I'm like the lottery to be mugged. So that is something that I'm always extremely cautious with. Just knowing that like my gear does make me a bit more of a target, especially in certain countries. And that is something I have to be very vigilant with, because I've had experiences where I notice people, especially in South America, I would notice people because I do speak a bit of Spanish, they would be talking about my gear, and that's when I'm like, okay, like I got to get out of this situation, So that's one. There's also different sides of it. Like you do have to give up certain luxuries. I remember when I was in Southeast Asia, I probably only had 5 or 6 hot showers the entire time. Because most of the places I went to, just for whatever reason, didn't have hot water. Or in the Philippines, I was using just a little pail in a bucket, and I would just scoop it and just pour it over my head, and that was how I showered every day. So you are giving up a lot of luxuries in that sense, just to have access to certain places. Also, when you're traveling as a videographer, content creator, filmmaker, whatever you want to call it, a lot of the times like you're at the mercy of your schedule and the weather. So you may only have 2 days in a location, but if the weather sucks, like you're just not getting those shots that you were hoping to. And you got to learn to live with that. Like things aren't always going to be on your side. So there's just so much that goes into it behind the scenes that people don't necessarily see. Also, even just the time that you spend editing. So where I think some videographers do it one way, others do it another. I like to edit as I'm in a location for the most part. So when I was in Southeast Asia or in South America, I'm editing my photos and my videos while I'm there. At least I try my best to, if I can. And so that means I give up like going out meeting. So if I meet people at hostel, I give up going out on, a night out most of the time. There's just like so much behind the scenes that goes into it that really can make it a headache, but overall it's such a net positive for me.
Mm-hmm. And just kind of quickly too, can you explain to people how you afford to do all of this travel? Because I'm sure that's one thing people are curious about. I know there's one point where you're working 3 jobs, 54 days in a row, but just kind of quickly break down like how you afford to do all this travel.
Yeah, so that's definitely a very popular question. For me, it's like it's all about what you give up to get something. The sacrifices that you give to achieve some sort of opportunity. So for me, like I'm 24 years old, but I still live at home. And that's an active choice because I can't afford to live on my own. I can afford all my bills and stuff, but I choose not to because I know that by me saving money on rent and groceries, I get to allocate that into whether that's camera gear or flights, or just like my budget as I go travel. So that makes it really, really easy. And I know for a lot of people, that's just not something that they'd be willing to give up, and that's fine. So that's like the first thing that saves me a lot of money. I'm also willing to just like start little side hustles. Like I've started a car detailing business or little landscaping side work, or just like other types of video, like wedding projects and stuff. I'm always willing to put more on my plate to afford the next trip. And like you were saying, at one point I had 3 jobs pre-COVID. So I was working 9 to 5 at a marketing agency, full-time on salary. Then I was working at a steakhouse in Canada in my evenings. And then I would also on weekends go on other shoots, doing video and photo work to help people have content for their Instagrams locally. And so I'm just willing to do all these different things, and give up. Like I gave up in 2017 Fridays and Saturday nights, going out with friends almost entirely. I might do that once a year, twice a year, but that's 50 weeks of the year that I'm not doing that. For the most part, those Fridays and Saturday nights I'm working. So I look at it like, if I'm at the restaurant, I'm doubling my money. I'm saving money by not going out, and not like buying Ubers or alcohol or other things like that. And I'm actually making money because I'm either bussing tables or serving steaks, and that's awesome. So for me, it's just like I've wanted travel more than I've wanted anything else. And because my desire to go to the rest of the world has been so great, the cost that I'm willing to pay is just like something I don't even think of.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard you describe your travel as almost an addiction. You have an addiction to travel, and you almost get angsty when you're not traveling. So I'm assuming COVID made it a little bit of a challenge for you because it made you unable to travel. And one thing I'm curious about though, with that in mind, with being unable to travel because of COVID, when I was prepping for this and I was listening to old podcasts or anything like that, one thing you pretty much never ever mentioned was Ottawa or Ontario. So I'm curious if COVID and forcing you to be unable to travel, did that make you appreciate your own backyard a little bit more?
Oh my God, so much, because I basically, like, my whole life, I was so much of the thought that the cliche of Ottawa is the city that fun forgot. I was like, oh, as a mountain biker, we have so far from the best mountains. I was like, we ain't Whistler. And then I was like, I always wanted to be somewhere tropical where I could surf. And yeah, there's a bit of surfing on the river, but I don't think it compares. I love wildlife and ocean life. So I was like, I can't even go, I'm not near the ocean and that sort of stuff. And then our winters are so harsh. So I always thought like Ottawa, just like, it's not for me. It's just a government town. And then COVID hits and I was like, you know what? I need to get my travel fix. I'm still that addict. I still need to go on adventures, different experiences, meet new people, and just experience different aspects of life that I haven't before. And so I started going on different unique adventures around Ottawa, documenting them on TikTok as part of that personal branding strategy. Things exploded immediately as soon as I started doing that. And I realized, okay, like, cool, like this could be that little personal branding secret and tool that I've been looking for to kind of build myself and actually get people to see my work and hopefully connect with more people that way. And then over time, I started realizing, like, damn, like this isn't just me doing it for getting, like, you know, attention to my work. This is certainly me doing it because I actually love exploring this region. I love the sunsets out here. I love going to places like Eagle's Nest or Rock Dunder or Sheila McKee Park at 4:45 in the morning, or Shirley's Bay, or even just downtown, going on in different places in the market. Like, I love Clarence Street. I love going to Majors Hill Park and all these other spots. And it really, really showed, like, this summer, by making that commitment and having that open mind to actually giving it a shot, how unique the National Capital Region is and how awesome it is to be able to explore some world-class destinations here.
And I do want to dive into TikTok, but right before we do, you ended up getting laid off from your marketing job, but you used that as a blessing in disguise almost, because it allowed you to pretty much dive headfirst and focus like almost all of your efforts on a TikTok, right?
Yeah, so I recognize, so I study like platforms as much as I do videography and photography and like the artistic side of it. So I study like the distribution pretty intensely. And so I was seeing people like just explode on TikTok seemingly overnight. And I know there's no such thing as an overnight success, but I just found it. I was like, oh, this is almost like an equalizer. And by that, I mean, it's like if you have talent already here within storytelling, in some capacity, and you share it on this platform, like, you will get exposed, because it basically responds to how people react to it. And if people react positively, you get shown more. And I was like, okay, like, I think I can elicit that sort of response, and really build something impactful, because I knew that YouTube and Instagram would just take like literally years to build, and it'd be very difficult to do that locally. And so I was like, okay, like let's try this out, and started posting 2 to 4 times a day for 2 months from April and May. Just really showcasing my international work, and it got a bit of attention. And then from there started doing the local stuff, like I was just saying, and it exploded. So I remember in the span of 1 week, I did 3 or 4 different locations within 10 days that each of them received like a minimum 150,000 views, anywhere from 150,000 to nearly 400,000 views. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's like a solid chunk of the population of the city is seeing this. So, and I just haven't stopped since. I enjoy it. I love it and that sort of stuff. And it's been tons and tons of fun.
And so this explosions happened through the spring and summer of 2020, but you were actually your first TikTok. You joined the platform in December 2018. So you'd been on it for a minute, and you mentioned how you were kind of posting all of your international travel in the beginning. And I believe at one point you were doing that 2 to 4 posts a day with the international travel, but that wasn't hitting. So I'm curious how you're still putting in all this effort, how you're pushing through and not getting discouraged when your content, when you're posting so much and you're going all in and it's still not hitting.
Yeah, so I think it was a couple things. So one, the fact that we were in a pandemic meant that I didn't have many other options. So it wasn't like quitting to me just made absolutely no sense, because I was like, what else am I supposed to do right now? I have all 3 of my jobs are gone. I was like, my freelance work has disappeared. And I was like, at least I can show some of the things that I care about. And then maybe say that like I know at least a little bit about TikTok and show that to potential clients, and maybe I can land something there. But I had seen it firsthand. Like, my best friend, Johnny, grew to over 300,000 people on the platform in the comedy space. So I was like, oh my goodness, like this is doable. And then I was seeing another one of my good buddies, RJ, was just making silly little videos from time to time, and he had to hit 25,000 people. And I was like, there's no way I can't do that. So it's just having that faith, because I always believed that if people could at least just see my work, at least some of them would care. And I just stuck with that and realized, like, you know what, like I just can't give up. Like, I'm a firm believer that the only people that fail are ones that give up. Because if you or die, like, and I know that sounds grim, but it's I honestly think it's true. The people that have had success, they're successful because they never stopped. And that doesn't, like, if it took me 15 years, I think I'd still do it, and that's just how I look at it.
And that switch to local content, was that entirely driven by you just needing to travel? And so you decided to document while you're doing the local travels? Or was it almost like you analyzed your page, you realized international wasn't working, and you wanted to test local content?
So it was definitely something I wanted to test. A buddy of mine, he invited me out to Eagle's Nest and we were going to go towards sunset. And I was like, awesome. Like, I'll make a little TikTok about this and just see how people respond to it. But at the core, it was definitely more of like, I need more adventures in my life. I can't keep repurposing content from old adventures. Like, I need, like, just knowing who I am, I need to create something new. I need to be able to, like, go out and do something, film something, and, like, have some sort of experience that I could say, like, I really utilized 2020 well. And that was, like, certainly the motivating factor. So really, really happy with how things turned out because of that, because that first video at Eagle's Nest that my buddy took me on was the first video to really explode. And that was also, like, that first little, like, bit of, like, results that I recognized, like, okay, like, now that I've had one video go big, I think I can do this more times. And I have, which has been really, really something I'm lucky for. But yeah, it's just been fun, man. Like, that's it made my summer so much better being able to explore everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And so I believe correct me if this number's incorrect, but once things took off, you hit over 1 million views in 2 weeks. And you already said how things were going crazy in just 1 week, but 1 million views over 2 weeks. And so I'm curious, what about the local content was the unlock? Why do you think that Ottawa content was what allowed you to finally find success? Because you're sharing these, like, incredible travels from around the world, but it's stuff in your own backyard that took off. I'm curious why you think that was it, why that was the content that worked.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. So it was like, at one point it was like, okay, I got 1 million views in 2 weeks, and then it was 2 million views in 28 days, and I was like, holy goodness. And I started thinking more about it during that time. I was like, why is this the case? Like, why is Ottawa somehow the thing that's putting me on, and not the Philippines, or not Spain, or not Portugal, or not Peru or something? And what I really realized was, like, okay, like, because we are in a pandemic, people only have access to what's around them right now. So that was huge. Like, just being able to understand that it's like, no, there's a lot of interest in people just finding things and activities to do outside that are beautiful, that are fun, and just help them, like, improve the quality of their memories for the summer. And so it was like, awesome. So, like, there's one thing. The second thing was, if you know how to use TikTok well, like, you can really target people geographically. And so I started recognizing, like, I can really just put this in by categorizing my hashtags in a local region. It's going to put it in front of a bunch of people here in Ottawa. And then I can become an authority figure that way. So there was kind of like the aspect that the platform allowed me to do so as well. And then just realistically, like, it's fun. Like, people like to go on adventures and share them with their friends. Like, if I started making content about a local spot, I would always make it in a way that people could share it with their friends so that they could invite them on it too, which kind of created this domino effect of everybody sharing it with each other, and then really getting, like, these locations and some of that work exposed.
A couple things I want to dive into based on that answer. So first off, I think it's an important thing that people should take away hashtags, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but so when you hashtag on TikTok, it doesn't work like Instagram, or if you hashtag Ottawa, the only way that people find that content is either if they follow you, they click on the hashtag Ottawa. But for TikTok, they read that hashtag and realize that it's for Ottawa content related to Ottawa, so they'll service it to people beyond just that hashtag, and they almost use those hashtags as, like, tags in a YouTube video to help figure out how to distribute it properly, right?
Entirely. So your hashtags, basically, it's who or where are the groups of people that I want to be connected with, and then TikTok will put that on the For You page. So Ottawa, Ontario, Ottawa, Canada, those are all regional type hashtags. So by using those, TikTok's algorithm knows, okay, we see these, we know that we can put these in front of people in this geographical space. And so that really, really helped me grow. Even just, like, certain things like summer adventures. I would hashtag a lot, and so that would get me people outside of Ottawa checking into my work. What I found tricky with using more generic hashtags, though, was that I wasn't able to quite find the audience that was specific to the content that I was creating. And by that I mean it's like, okay, if I'm talking about this beautiful viewpoint that is near Kingston, then it's like, okay, Kingston is halfway between Ottawa and Toronto, so I can hashtag both Toronto and Ottawa. But let's say if I use summer adventures, that could be showing that to people out in Vancouver or, Florida or other places like that who aren't going to be getting any value out of that destination in Kingston. So that's when I really started focusing more on the very specific hashtags as opposed to the general one. When I recognized that, I was like, no, like for right now, we definitely start geographically, start with where, literally where the audience is, and then build it out further.
Is there a certain number of hashtags you should be using? Like, should it be 3? Should it be 1? Maybe 5? Like, is there a specific number you try to stick to?
I try to stick to using as many hashtags as I can actually physically type in. So my captions will be 5 words. It'll be I loved this spot. And then I just do a bunch of hashtags until I have no more characters left to use. I think the more you use, the better. It gives the algorithm a bit more context for who you're trying to look for.
And would this hashtag strategy work beyond just geographic locations? Like, for example, if I start putting out content related to marketing and I use marketing specific or business specific hashtags, would this same strategy still work?
Entirely. It's all about being specific, right? So if, let's say, marketing content, so hashtag podcast marketing, hashtag podcast growth, hashtag marketing tips, all those are extremely specific and are going to have extremely specific demographics. I think TikTok is certainly a platform that is brilliant because you can you don't have to put any ads behind it to directly target who you're looking for. And I think it's a very intelligent algorithm that way.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing you said too in your original answer, beyond just the hashtags, but you said you use certain audio cues in your videos to try and generate shares. So talking about creating the content, let's kind of walk through that from the front to back. So we'll get to adding in the voiceovers and the audio cues. But when you film these videos, they're pretty much entirely done on your phone, right?
Yeah, so mostly my phone and my drone are my 2 main tools. And as for the audio cues that I'll add to get more shares, oftentimes what I'll say is what I recognize is that restaurants and adventures, hikes in these little local destinations and viewpoints or whatever, they are always things that people want to include with their friends. They want to bring a date there. They want to bring a group there or something along those lines, which the nature of the content breeds itself to being very friendly and open to being spread around and shared with other people. And because I can recognize that, I try to put in subtle cues that can elicit that response. So if there's a bunch of patio or picnic tables, I'll say, this is a great spot for a picnic. Who has a picnic by themselves? Nobody. So as soon as I say something like that, people can be oh, okay, who's the person I want to bring here on a picnic? Or make those plans with. I could say this is a great spot to go with the homies. And so it's okay, who are the friends that I want to bring here? So I'll try and put in those subtle little cues where I'm not directly asking people for shares, but what I am saying is think about who you would bring here, and if you're thinking about it enough, you'll send it to them, and that has really, really helped grow this account.
And so you're editing everything you're not editing in TikTok, right? You're using the Adobe Creative Suite and you're editing in Premiere and stuff?
Yeah, everything I edit is in Premiere.
Okay. And I'm curious as to why you film a majority of the intros to your videos at your house and not at the location.
Yeah, so a lot of the times it's a couple reasons. One, sometimes I forget, so that makes it easy. So it's dang it. 2, I find it doesn't matter that much where you film the intro as long as it's because it's just me speaking to the camera. 3, I try as often as I can, if I can, to get myself in golden light in golden hour and getting the nicer sunlight hitting my face. I know that might sound silly, but I have noticed a significant difference in the amount of watch time that I get and the quality or the like the metrics that come from the video if I'm like doing that intro in nice lighting and like really nice golden hues. And so oftentimes, like if it's the middle of the day at a location, I'm like, you know what, it'll look a little bit nicer if I just wait to do this at home at like 7 p.m. So that's like a little detail that I think of. And then the last one is like sometimes those locations are busy and I don't necessarily want to be doing my intro with like 30 people around and having all that sort of distraction and that background noise. So I'd rather just, if it's at my house, I know that the only background noise there might be is a bit of birds chirping and it's not distracting to those very critical first 3 seconds.
What are some of those other little things you do in your videos that people might not realize? Like I know you increase the audio for your intro to kind of catch the attention right away. What are some other little things you do?
Yeah, so like you're saying, first thing I do is like I put in that intro video and I raise the audio levels until they're just about to be peaking. So in Premiere, I can see like how my decibel meters are like if they're clipping or not, and I try to get it just below that so that it's as loud as it can possibly be, so it really catches your attention on the For You page. I also color correct and color grade all my footage. I use the same LUT lookup table, which is kind of just like a color profile on every single thing, so it does create like a bit of a style. I add a lot of drone work into these videos, which adds a more professional looking like element to it, which has really, really helped. And then I'll also use like very animated texts. So I have a few After Effects plugins that I use to, you know, make my text look significantly different than what you would typically find. I don't use it all the time, but I do from time to time. But it's different than what you would find on other platforms. So trying to add that extra bit of production value and quality to TikTok, I think is a very smart way to go about it. And then I also leave a cue at the end saying, be sure to follow for more summer adventures. Or now that it's autumn, be sure to follow for more autumn adventures. Because I noticed the first time I used that cue, I got a couple thousand follows from it. And that made that video go even more viral, because that's another metric TikTok cares about is, are people following you from this content? And so those are kind of like all the little things that I try to stack into 15 seconds.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit more about that decision and the 15 seconds, because that's not a lot of time to kind of pack all of those little things you're trying to do while tell the story of where you're going. So why do you stick to that short time frame when you could quadruple that and do a 60-second video?
So for me on TikTok, it's very difficult to get watch time to exceed 10 seconds on any piece of content. So 10 seconds of watch time on a 15-second video is 67% of the entire duration of it, which is a pretty good watch time rate. 10 seconds on 60 seconds is a sixth. So you're looking at like what? I'm not the best at math. Less than that. So not a math guy here. And so you'd be looking at significantly less. So that's like important. So that means that by having a higher watch time rate, you're going to be shown to more people. But more importantly, what I think is most like critical with that sort of thing is that most of the audio bits on TikTok are 15-second clips. That's all the access that you have to like the most popular songs. And so for me, it's like, okay, like there are certain songs I know have a greater potential of going viral than others. There are certain songs that fit the vibe of this video more than others. And if I go 16 or 17 seconds, that audio is going to cut at the very end and look kind of just unprofessional. So I try to fit as much information in as short of a period of time as I can, using the best sounds as well.
And you mentioned how a couple of things when you were speaking over the last couple of questions is you mentioned how like you've noticed from your data that when you're in golden hour, there's nice light hues, your videos perform better. You notice that TikTok cares about who follows you based off videos. So what does your process look like for evaluating your content?
Yeah, so for me, it's just understanding, say, what are the things that I haven't included in this one that were included in other videos that performed really well. And sometimes like you can't match those things. I've noticed that it's like sometimes there's things that you can't do about it. It's just the algorithm is just not on your side for whatever reason. And so, for example, like I've noticed that if going back to the golden hour thing, that extends to the locations too. I've noticed videos that I did out in Tremblant where I had these great drone shots on a very musky and cloudy day. They didn't perform well. Whereas I had places that didn't look nearly as nice that were in beautiful golden hues during the day that did really well. So it's that perception of beauty that you create in that video is going to elicit a reaction and response and emotion from that audience that is going to get them to keep watching. And TikTok they have the data to understand what's going on, and they'll put it out more or less based on that. So that's certainly like a big part of it. Realistically, for me, the goal is just keep putting out content that I think can provide a lot of value to people. And the mission is just improve the quality of your memories. And if I can do that, then I'm pretty happy. And I've noticed that even the videos that don't perform as well, I'm still happy with. Because I know that people that follow me and watch them, and even if it's 5,000 people instead of 50,000, those 5,000 people are still getting a lot of value on that. And that's what creates that depth and that brand that I think I've been able to build in the past couple months.
And talk to me about I believe it's the 10 and 1 rule, right?
It is. So the 10 and 1 rule is I know if I get 10% of the viewers to like the video and 1% to share it, the video is going to do quite well. On a local basis, your sample size for like how many people are actually watching the video is a little bit less, but typically that means 25 to 60,000 views. And in a very local and condensed area, that's quite good.
And with that in mind, with being in a local and condensed area, do you ever feel like there's a glass ceiling that you're approaching? Because you're growing at a great rate. Like you said, you've reached, I think it was 400,000 people with one video, which is like 40% of the entire population of the city of Ottawa. So do you feel like there's a glass ceiling you're going to eventually hit? And if so, how you plan to break through it?
Yeah, so entirely. So I've noticed like my first 20,000 followers on TikTok came within 6 weeks. Now I'm just under, like a shade under 30K right now. And so that that third group of 10,000 has taken me a couple months to grow. And I think a lot of that is because it's mostly local so far, which means that there's only so many fish out there to catch that are remaining. Especially like I do feel like anybody that is in Ottawa that has been on TikTok for months has probably seen me on their For You page at some point, and if they were going to follow me, they would have already. So there certainly is a bit of a bubble in that ceiling that you have to break through. Right now, the strategy to do that is to progressively move a bit more outside of Ottawa. Go to spots that are near Montreal and try to do trips to Montreal when things are a little more safe, where I talk about restaurants, viewpoints, hikes, destinations in that area, and then collect people from there. Same with Toronto, and then when things can open up, maybe out west, and then eventually internationally as well. But it's building these little pockets of communities everywhere that I can and becoming an authority in different cities. And then as I start doing international travel, I've built this brand and this trust where people have seen me go to their city. They've seen me talk about places that they've actually been to, so they know that the places that I'm talking about in Southeast Asia or Australia or New Zealand are legit. So, and then maybe that can incentivize them to go to those places as well at some point.
Are you familiar with Charlie Rocket at all?
I am. Winning streak, baby.
Winning streak. But where I was going to make the kind of the relationship there was his big thing when he was in music was talking about boiling a pot of water, not boiling an ocean, where he would basically, it's easier to boil one pot of water than the whole ocean. Then once you have one boiling pot of water, you can add more water and then that boils quicker. And then once that's done, you can add more water and then that third pot will boil quicker, and just over and over and over. And that eventually compounds. And that's essentially what you're doing with your TikTok strategy is you're going to boil this pot of water that is Ottawa, and then you're going to boil Montreal and then boil Toronto. And then it's just going to go faster and faster and faster and faster. And you're just taking the time to lay out a really solid foundation right now.
Yeah, it's funny because I do enjoy Charlie, and I never thought of it that way because I do remember listening to him talk about how when he was trying to put 2 Chainz on the map, he would just try to get him like the hottest guy in Atlanta at each of the clubs he went to, like make that club like love him, and then progressively do that and have that spread, and now he's 2 Chainz. So yeah, I like that sort of analogy there.
Thanks. And then so in terms of like going all in on TikTok, like we talked about how you ended up getting laid off, but you viewed that as an opportunity to kind of dive headfirst into this. And then the agency came back and they offered you your old job back. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you turned it down to focus on TikTok. Can you explain the thought process behind that decision?
Yeah, so I did turn it down, and honestly, like I'm proud of it because I built at the time. I think I was at 25,000 followers on TikTok, and there were and still are plenty of local businesses that do contact me fairly regularly to collaborate in some fashion. And I recognized, okay, I can go back to this agency right away and make obviously more money than what I am currently making on TikTok. And at some extent, that makes sense. But I felt the opportunity cost was just too great to give it up because I knew if I took that 9 to 5 back, that basically there would just be so many facets of my life, including TikTok, that I would have to cut out. And I felt the long-term cost of that was just way too high. So if I'm working 5 days a week, 9 to 5, and then I work, say, 2 weeknights at the Keg, and then both Saturday and Sunday serving steaks, then essentially what I'm giving myself is just Saturday and Sunday morning to go out to a location to shoot a video. And then I also only have Saturday and Sunday afternoon and maybe a couple evenings if I'm lucky to edit those videos. And I was like, that is just way, way too much or way too little of a commitment to the platform that I just like, I wasn't willing to neglect that much. And I felt like after maybe 6, 7, 8 months, I was like, I was pretty confident. And this was, I only turned it down like a month ago. But I was pretty confident that after like 6 to 8 months that I would be making more money through social media, or at least a comparable amount as what I was before at the agency. So I was like, long term, this really, I don't think makes sense for me. And then on top of that, like there was a bit of pride in that decision because it was like, I really, really worked like my tail off during this period so that I could set something up for myself that could provide me some opportunities. And it was like, damn, like I did it. So why would I go back and not try to ride this momentum? Because for me, everything is momentum. If you get, it's all winning streaks, you know? And I just really felt that I was on that streak and I was like, I can't not keep this up right now.
So what does then your current approach to TikTok look like? Like how often are you going out on these adventures? What's your posting schedule look like right now, especially with the fact that you turned your job down and you're focusing on it solely?
Yeah, so TikTok, I'm trying to post at least 3 to 4 times a week. Right now I got 2 videos planned for the next couple of days, which is great. But essentially I have what I call like it's like a triangle. I call it like the movie analogy, which you might find interesting. So it's how I feed TikTok into my overall social media branding strategy. So right now I'm using TikTok as kind of like the top of the funnel to feed people into my Instagram and YouTube to try and build those communities as well. And it's a very integral part of that. And so right now, essentially what I'm focusing on is that YouTube is going to be the home of my most important content. That's where my best films are going to be posted. That's where you can see the most of my personality and my best ideas and the most valuable information is going to be posted there. And so I look at YouTube, the video that I make once a week is going to be the movie. And then I'm looking at TikTok is the trailer for the movie. So for example, yesterday I put out 6 great Ontario viewpoints as a video. And so now the trailer for that video is going to be 6 great Ontario viewpoints, but I posted on TikTok and it's a 15-second video just listing them off. And then at the end, instead of asking people to follow me, it's saying like, check out my YouTube channel if you want to see more information about this or whatever. And then Instagram becomes the promotional tool on the stories where I talk about on my stories like, hey, this video is out, letting people know, linking it in my bio. And then I have the movie poster, which is like my favorite photo that I want to represent that video. So it's kind of cool how right now like you can really feed people in on all of these channels into each other. And I just started doing that a couple weeks ago, and long-term plan is to keep doing that and see how it works and adjust accordingly.
And so ultimately everything kind of funnels back into YouTube. So why are you making YouTube the number one priority? Like TikTok's the trailer and then but Instagram is the movie poster and you can promote the stories, but it always comes back to YouTube. Why that?
So I think YouTube on a long enough timeline has the greatest value. It has the greatest income structure from, Google AdSense being able to pay you, as well as brand deals. I think are most lucrative if you can build an audience. And I also think YouTube has the greatest translation. If you can build a strong and big YouTube community, they will follow you on other platforms. I don't think it's quite the same brand equity on other places. But that's just my opinion on that stuff. For me, why I put actually a bit more effort into TikTok and focus on TikTok than YouTube is because I know that 1/5 of the effort can produce 10 times the results in terms of who's going to see my work. So, in terms of growing that YouTube channel, I know that the best way to grow it is build TikTok, get people interested there, and hopefully feed them over.
One thing with your YouTube that I was super like, I didn't expect was so one, your YouTube name is Nomads, which I was like, oh, that's a pretty generic name, but like, so I'm sure there's a lot of competition, but like you own the top search ranking for a YouTube account called Nomads. When I looked it up in search, it looked like it was a big media company, which with the photo and the name. How did you pull that off?
Oh man, great question. It was originally the Venture Bros. It was originally like a channel I made with my boys, and it was gonna be like the four of us. This is 2016, like end of 2016. The four of us, adventure guys, mountain bikers, like we're gonna share like our extreme lives. And then I realized I was kind of the only one that was really really committed to it. And so I was like trying to think of different names, like what is very travel-y. But I also wanted it to be plural because I wanted to name it after the community and not myself. Because I thought on a long enough timeline, like that makes sense. Like, oh, what's up, Nomads? And if I were to ever do merch, Nomads merch, Nomadic merch, or something along those lines, I felt there was a lot to play with. And so I just looked it up, Nomads all caps. I didn't even actually look it up. I just put it in. I just changed the username on YouTube and it worked. So it's nothing more to that than just luck, really.
That's awesome. And speaking of the Venture Bros, the one video I was curious about that you filmed and documented the entire process of your friend Johnny breaking his back.
Yeah. That was the first, funny enough, that was the first vlog I'd ever edited. Like, I'd never done such a thing. And yeah, he got messed up.
That's crazy. But so like talk to me just about that ability. Like that's one thing. Like I've recently started vlogging on my personal YouTube channel. I haven't promoted it anywhere, but I'm just more excited to have the ability to kind of look back and watch those vlogs. Like, is that something you enjoy? Like, yes, you're building a community, but you're also documenting these incredible experiences you're having. You'll be able to kind of relive those moments through these videos you're creating.
Yeah, I'll be honest, that's the biggest motivator entirely because I know it's like one day, let's say I have kids in my 40s or whatever, and they're old enough to like go on YouTube or whatever, assuming it still exists, which good to fair chance it will. I can say like, hey, do you want to see what your dad did like when he was 21? And I can show them like where I went to in the Philippines or Peru and all that stuff. Or do you want to see what happened to Uncle Johnny when he broke his back? And there's a vlog of it of like me like and him in the ambulance like going to the hospital, and that sort of stuff. So it's just cool to me that it's like these videos, like they're not going away, like they're sticking with me for the rest of my life. I can be 85 and looking back on my youth, and that is a luxury that is so understated. And I don't think many people are looking at it that way, but it's like, imagine being 90 years old and you get to see what you were doing at 22 in HD. That to me blows my mind. You get to see what you looked like. You got to see what this location was like. And in that video, you're describing like the taste of the food and like the smell of the ocean and all that. That to me is the biggest motivating factor.
I agree. I just think it's just special to think about what that's going to be like in 20, 30 years. But talk to me then about like you said you restarted YouTube because you took a break to go all in on TikTok, but now that you've started to post again, what's your strategy looking like? I know like before you really got on TikTok, your videos that performed overarchingly way better than anything else you posted was your top 10 videos, right? You have your top 3 videos or your top 10 best things to do in Chile is your most viewed, for example. that kind of your game plan is to do more of those lists because those perform well in search, and that kind of be like your top of funnel on YouTube specifically. And then kind of the reason people stick around is for the vlogs and your personality on the back end of those top 10 videos.
You nailed it. That's exactly it. So for me, it's like funnel people in with some sort of work that provides a lot of value. On TikTok, that's like the places that I go and showcase people. On YouTube, that'll be like the guides that I put out on beautiful locations and what to do, how to do it. And then just showing the behind the scenes. So if I talk about like the 10 best places to go in Siargao, that's for one. I've got like individual videos for almost all of those 10 places. And I think that's something I want to keep up with long term. So for me, like if I go on a trip, the focus is make some vlogs first, because those are the easiest to put out and I can have those ready almost right away. Make some vlogs, then put out a travel guide around those vlogs where I can like showcase those, and then have like a short film, just like that Philippines one that I was telling you about, which showcases like what my experience was like at a more intimate level, and is also a little more, as the videographer nerd of me, getting a bit more of that creative element in there too. So that way I'm kind of ticking all those little cool boxes for me, and it keeps my content flowing quickly, and gives each member of the audience like a little bit of something different.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say too, my favorite video you've done is your short film on Siargao. Like that one, I watched a good number of your videos, and that one was definitely my favorite.
I appreciate that.
And just out of curiosity, are you still working on a film kind of on the back end long term called The Architect?
So that's a great question. So it's on the back burner for now, and I'll let the audience know that's listening. So The Architect is a film that I want to create, and it's about designing and architecting your own life and your own dreams. And that was certainly something that, you know, the Southeast Asia trip taught me. I really felt like I was the architect of my own life, and I wanted to make that film. What I started to realize as I was like going through the process of writing it, scripting it, and even beginning to edit it, I was like, you know what? I think this is going to have so much more impact in 3, 4, 5 years when I have a lot more examples of this. When I can say it's like, no, like I've been saying I'm going to be designing these dreams for years, and this is like the culmination of like half a decade. So it's something that it's in the long-term plan for now.
Mm-hmm. And then talking about the other socials. So you said Instagram, that's where you post your movie posters. You can post on the stories, but organic reach on Instagram is declining and it's lower than other platforms. So why do you still prioritize that in your overarching strategy?
Well, part of it is I love photography too. And I do think that my drone photos do stand out, especially from a local perspective. And so that's like a big thing, and it's a great place to like showcase my work, whether that's as a freelancer, content creator, or anything. So it's almost like my portfolio. So I always try to focus on like if somebody wants to see really high quality photos and great videos, I can send them to my Instagram and they'll see the type of work that I produce, and they can decide to hire me on that regardless. And then it's also it's a fun platform. I love every aspect of social media. I love the creation. I love the connections that you can make with people. And I think Instagram right now is the best place to make connections. You just slide into the DMs, message people, connect with people. You can make group chats, and that's why I think it's a really important place.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think from a cultural perspective, Instagram is still really important. Like when people open their phone, a lot of times it's just a default to instinctively open Instagram. So I completely agree that it's still important to be there. And talk to me about your opinion on Reels then. As someone who's found success on TikTok, how do you feel about the Instagram clone?
I don't like it as much, to be honest. It doesn't have nearly the same organic reach that TikTok does, which is an automatic negative. Like you're not going to be seen by nearly as many people. I don't find its like editing tools nearly as customizable. There's still some glitches with it that I hope can be fixed with some software updates. Like I remember I was trying to tag somebody in an Instagram Reels, and I hit @ and the first letter of their name, and I clicked on their profile, and then it filled out their username in my caption. But when it posted it, the only thing that was included in their username was the first letter that I typed. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like it should be like as soon as I click their profile, it fills in and that person is tagged. I shouldn't have to actually spell out the entire thing. Um, and I think that's going to mess a lot of people up. Also, you can't edit captions on Instagram Reels, but you can on Instagram posts. I don't get that. It's just weird to me. Also the psychology of it as I'm looking at Reels, I'm like, it just feels off. I can't quite tell what Instagram is trying to do with it.
Yeah, I think for the biggest thing for me is that Instagram Reels is a feature versus TikTok as a platform. And that's the biggest distinction, I think, between the two.
Exactly.
But can you elaborate a little more into the catch-22 situation you think Instagram's in?
Yeah, so I think what's really tricky about Instagram is that, so at the moment, Instagram has very low organic reach because they're prioritizing ad spend. They want people to be putting their advertising dollars into the platform to reach new customers. That makes sense. It's a great way to increase revenue. The problem is that when a platform like TikTok comes in and the organic reach is so high without a single cent in ad spend, basically what happens is that now creators, especially up and coming creators like myself, have a great incentive to go to TikTok to try and build a brand because Instagram isn't going to allow us to do that without putting money behind it. And in many cases, especially small creators, don't have the money necessarily to put behind to get the results that they'd be looking for. And so for right now, like I clearly felt that there was an incentive for me to create on TikTok. So I created on TikTok and it paid off. On Instagram, I could have put the same effort in and reached maybe 200 more people, which is just insane to me. And so what ends up happening is in order for TikTok or in order for Instagram to really improve the quality of the content that is on the platform, there has to be incentives for creatives to create there. And that means increase organic reach. By increasing organic reach and who people can reach just from the nature of their content, you're going to get better value stuff on there. And it's not always going to be absolutely perfect the way that Instagram currently is. Like it's almost like the psychology of Instagram accepts nothing less than perfection. And that's a bit of a problem. And so what ends up happening is if, let's say Instagram in a hypothetical situation increases organic reach, well, now the value of their ads are less. And so brands are going to be like, why am I spending $20,000 a month on your ad platform when I could spend $2,000 on an influencer that'll get me twice as much reach because they know how to leverage organic well? And so it feeds into itself. It's like, who's going to be making content and all that sort of stuff, and ads, are they going up or down? And it's just a mess.
Mm-hmm. And what about Twitter? I'm just kind of going platform by platform here, but you've been retweeted by Ottawa's mayor. He's got over 100,000 followers. Do you put a lot of value in Twitter, or more so just something you kind of post on passively?
Twitter's a very passive platform for me at the moment. I mostly use it for news, sports, and politics. So it's like not a personal branding strategy for me. If people share my work there, I will engage, and maybe down the line, I'll start engaging in more conversations around that stuff. I think it is a great platform that people can use intelligently. I think if you're a musician or an artist of any sort, hopping into conversations about that topic makes a lot of sense and becoming an authority figure that way. Personally, it just doesn't do much for me when I've got my things tied up in other places.
What about Life's Better Abroad? That's your blog and now a new podcast as well. What's the strategy behind those?
Yeah, so Life's Better Abroad is a part of the long-term strategy. And so for me, eventually, like I'd like to have my own shop with a bit of merch there, maybe some prints that I can sell, or like digital products like, presets or something along those lines. And then I think long-term, what I'd love to have is a blog that's not written by me, but it's written by travelers that I connect with. And they can tell their stories and share their stories. It's a very community-centric thing that I want. Mostly right now, it's just I'm happy to have the website to show a bit of my work and happy to have that domain name. It's not a part of the current micro details, but it's in the macro picture.
But then, so my question with that then is, so you have Nomads on YouTube, you have Life's Better Abroad as a blog, and a podcast. You have James Life on Instagram and TikTok. Your branding is different kind of platform to platform. Is there ever a plan down the line to kind of unify them all into one place?
Yeah, it's something I think about frequently, to be honest. So the Nomads channel, it's like I love the name, but there is like that consideration of like, should I name this Life's Better Abroad? You know, because it's so travel focused. But at the same time, I'm doing local content right now, so I can't really go too hard on Life's Better Abroad when I'm not abroad. So right now I think they actually feed into each other pretty well. The way I'm looking at it at the moment is how similar to how Yes Theory has Seek Discomfort as their main brand. That's how I'd want myself to have Life's Better Abroad as like that sort of brand, if that makes sense. And I think what I'll end up doing is the reason it'll be called Nomads is because that's what I want to name my community. I don't want to name my community after me. You know, it's not going to be like, what's up the Low Gang, like how Logan Paul named it after himself, or Jake Paulers. I like Nomads because it's, you know, people can attribute it to themselves and it's not directly tied with me. I think it has a greater message. So like, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. But I'm always open to just continuously thinking about that and adapting.
I like that. And before we get into my wrap-up questions, which is the same standard set of questions I asked everybody before the end of every podcast, which on that note, I appreciate you sticking through this marathon of an episode, man. I just want to shout out for that. I have 3 of your quotes here that I'm just going to read them off one by one. I'm going to read one off, and then I want you to kind of give the context or an explanation behind it. We'll just go 1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
The first one is, you don't find your passions, you develop them.
Yeah, and so for me, that was very much inspired by Tom Bilyeu, who is definitely someone I look up to in the entrepreneurship world. I think what people really expect with passions, it's like, oh, how do I find my passion? I think it's actually cultivated. I think a passion begins as an interest. So for videography, for me, for example, it started as a little side thing for mountain biking. Never took it that seriously. The interest was always there. And then as Instagram became more and more popular, I became more interested in upgrading the quality of my videos and photo content. So it started cultivating from there. And then I was presented an opportunity to dive deep into video by telling CJ's story. And I loved it. And I was like, okay, let me explore this further. So I went further and further into understanding Premiere. And I realized, okay, I love this learning process. And I enjoy it more today than I did 3 years ago. And I enjoyed it quite a lot back then. I think that passion it's continuously, it's a work in progress. It's always developed and not just found.
Say yes and figure it out.
Yeah, say yes and figure it out later. I love that one. It's like, if a client were to come to me today and ask me like, do you do SEO? Honestly, I'd probably just say yes, and then just do all the research I can on it and try to connect with people who are experts in that field. I think it's just really smart to be adaptive. And I think that's how you learn things the quickest. Just say yes, figure it out, talk to the people who are experts in that, do your research, and just put together what you can quickly.
Time is our most valuable asset. We all have a finite hourglass. We just don't know how much sand is in it.
Yeah, so that one's one of my favorites. So basically it's like, you don't know how much time you have left on this earth. And I think losing somebody at such a young age really makes you understand that quickly. And so for me, it's like, I don't know how much time I got left. You know, the classic cliche, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. It could happen. You don't know. So I know that there's an hourglass that's ticking down every single day. No idea how much sand is left in it. So I want to act as if it's almost empty as often as I can.
I love that. Before I let you go here, I just want to dive into those same standard set of questions I ask everyone at the end of every episode. I used to call it rapid fire. People say these aren't really rapid fire questions. So I started calling it the Q&A, but then I realized this is a podcast and the whole thing is a Q&A. So that made no sense. So I don't really have the name for this section, but the first question is, you're going to dinner. You can take 3 people. It can be anybody dead or alive. Who do you take to dinner?
Okay. Easy question for me. So first one I'm taking is my grandfather on my dad's side. I never had the chance to meet him as he passed away, I believe, in the 70s. Second person I'm taking, my man Carey Price. He's been a stone brick wall my entire life. It's my hero. I gotta take him. And the third person I'm taking is my dream date, Amy Marie Gertner, former Vine girl. She's just my favorite person. So, yeah, I'd take those three.
What is the best advice you've ever been given?
Ooh, that's a good one. Every time I get asked this question, there's nothing in particular that I think pops up to my head. If I were to just say it simply, I think it's whether it's I don't know if subconsciously if I figured it out or if it's just been something somebody told to me a long time ago or just things that I pieced together from a bunch of different people. But I really like the mantra of just like live every day as if it's your last. I think just get the most out of those opportunities. If you're ever contemplating about not doing something, think about like if I didn't have the chance to do this again, would I regret not doing so? I think just following that is something that really can lead to a lot of fulfillment.
What's one thing about you people would not expect?
I was in a musical in high school. Yeah, I was in Greece. I can't sing like I mentioned, but I was a cheerleader in the play, in the musical, in front of everybody with short shorts, thunder thighs, and everything.
Is there video or a photo of this event?
Not on social media. I can send it to you though.
That would be hilarious. That'd be amazing. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
What is one thing that's so important everybody needs to know?
How much of a connection there is between physical and mental health. I think if you take care of your body and your health, your mental health will follow suit, and vice versa. If you take care of your mental health, the physical health will come. It's very simple, but the simplest advice is very difficult to follow.
So for the last question, I like to flip the script a little bit. So instead of me asking the question, it's you asking the question, but it's not to me. So pretend you have a crystal ball. You can ask this crystal ball any question and you'll get the 100% honest answer. What is one question you'd want to know the answer to?
One question I want to know the answer to. You see, I think it's a little different. I don't think there is anything I want to know. I think the value is in the question itself, if that makes sense. So, less looking for answers. If I were to ask any question, I hope that people could find their own answer for it, because it kind of varies from person to person. But that would be like if you had one last opportunity, you had one shot, one opportunity, seize everything you ever wanted. What is it that you would want to do? How would you spend your time? Who would it be with? And what is it that you think is about that circumstance that you can't achieve right now?
I love it. I love that question. But I want to thank you so much for taking time to be on this podcast, man. We're over 2 hours into it. Oof. I want to give you the floor. Where can the people find you? Plug anything and everything you got right now.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you for having me on, man. It's been a blast. But if you want to check me out, Instagram and TikTok, it's the same username. It's James Life. Life ends with an extra E, JAMESLIFEE. If you go to YouTube, check me out called Nomads. You want to see my little blog, which I don't really update much, but you can see my website, some of my work at lifesbetterabroad.com. But yeah, got to thank the man Jacob for having me on. It's been an awesome time.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you once again for taking time to be on this podcast. And I want to thank everybody for listening, whether you've listened the entire way through or you only listen to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. Everyone do me a big favor. Go and follow Jamie. I'll make sure everything's linked in the show notes down below, whether you want to check out his TikTok, YouTube, or read his blog. It'll all be down there. If you'd like to follow me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Jacob Kelly. Feel free to come and say hello. My DMs are always open. If you'd like to follow the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at My Social Life Podcast or YouTube by searching up My Social Life. As always, today's podcast is powered by TrueFan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.